All right, so I'm going to talk about caritive constructions in Tagalog. And uh, well, first of all, following the definition of caritive constructions adopted in the Caritive research project that we've already heard several times about during this conference, we don't see any specialized caritive constructions in Tagalog. However, there is a large number of periphrastic constructions. There are probably several dozens actually with different predicates. And of course, the natural question is, how do we choose which constructions we want to study? Uh, uh, so um, using the methodological stipulation suggested by Skolsky and others, if a language has several competing means of expressing the caritive meaning, for a typological study, we would use a more specialized, more grammaticalized, and more frequent construction or constructions. So there are no specialized constructions, so we should focus more on the more grammaticalized and more frequent parts of this stipulation. I suggest describing three constructions in Tagalog in this study of caritives. First of all, it's a construction with the negative existential predicate wala. Second, it's a construction with a combination of the negator hindi and the noun kasama, which means companion. And third, it's a construction with the combination of the same negator, hindi, and the noun dala, which means something like something or somebody being carried. So why these particular three constructions? First of all, the construction with the negative existential predicate, well, actually, it's also the negative possessive predicate, voila, seems to be the most common construction, caritive construction, at least in the caritive contexts that we find in Bible translations. And on the other hand, what constructions with voila are also seem to be quite frequent. So if we look at the corpus data, we find that voila has over 700,000 tokens in the whole corpus. Of course, these figures here include all different functions of these markers. So it's not just for caritive constructions, but nevertheless, there is probably some basis to claim that caritive constructions with voila are quite frequent. As for the constructions with kasama and dala, I believe that there is some basis to claim that they are at least somewhat grammaticalized as prepositions, while voila constructions, caritive clauses with voila are not grammaticalized, do not show any signs of grammaticalization. Then the nouns kasama and dala are actually representative of broader classes of nouns. So for kasama, it's a class of nouns with the prefix ka, which means denotes some shared entity or a situation. Some other examples of such nouns are kasali, co-participant, kabilang, included, katabi, adjacent, and so on. As for dala, it is representative of a class of nouns, which on the other hand, on the one hand, denote some objects being carried by an agent. So something like bitbit, carried in hands, hawak, held, keep, carried under the arm, and so on. On the other hand, it includes nouns which referring to objects which are used in a certain way. Well, the most generic noun out of these being the noun gamit, which means just an object used by someone. But there are plenty more nouns with more specialized meanings, like suot, something worn as an item of clothing. And finally, kasama and dala have a more generic meaning within these two respective classes of nouns. So on this slide, you can see examples of each type of constructions. In example one, we have construction with wala, with the caritive clause nang wala ako, without me. This clause wala ako can be used as a basic negative existential construction, which would mean I don't exist, or I'm not there, something like that. Example two shows a construction with hindi kasama. Venice left abroad without Rufa. Um, um, Literally, this means something like Venice left abroad with Rufa not being the companion. And in example three, we see a construction with Dala, where uh, she went home without Gian. Gian is a baby in this context, so literally it says something like she went home with Gian not being carried, implied by her. Uh, the data I used for this study comes in two kinds. On the one hand, I did searches in the online corpus of Tagalog, uploaded to sketchengine.eu, and Google searches, and I did those to fill up the typological questionnaire adopted within the Caritive project to find out what properties these constructions can have generally. And on the other hand, I also used a sample of 100 sentences for wala, caritive constructions with wala, 100 sentences for caritive constructions with hindi kasama, and 13 sentences with for caritive constructions with hindi dala. It's just 13 sentences for the last one because those are the only caritive constructions with dala that I found in the corpus. So I used this sample to look at tendencies and what properties are more frequent within the each of the type of constructions. So I'm not going to cover all the possible properties of these constructions that we can find in the questionnaire, because I don't have any time for that. So instead, I'm going to focus just on a few properties that show a lot of variation across the constructions, and which we can use to draw some interesting conclusions. So it's going to be semantic functions of the constructions, the linkers and cases, linkers connecting the caritive clauses, and cases used to mark the absentee. Then the linear positions, some evidence showing, suggesting that there is grammaticalization going on, some data on controllers of caritive clauses. Then if I have time, I'm going to show you some examples of clustering of properties for these constructions. And finally, say a few words about alternative means of expressing caritive in Tagalog. So in this table, you can see all the functions, semantic functions that I found accessible for these three constructions. Here we can see that the construction with wala is the more generic one. It covers almost all functions, while the construction with kasama can cover only 8 functions, and the construction with dala only 5 functions. But if we look at this sample, at the data in the sample, we see that the constructions, especially the construction with wala, has a way more restricted distribution, semantically speaking. Part of the semantic functions accessible for this construction are not represented in the sample at all. And we can see that in some way, the constructions are in complementary distribution. So, for example, temporary possession is expressed only with the construction with dala, while anchor parameter is predominantly expressed with the construction with wala. The same goes for concomitant situation function, while participant addition is only expressed with the construction with hindi kasama. There is also one thing that that's remarkable in this table, is that we don't find any instances of instrument in caritive constructions in this sample. And this is a little bit weird in terms well, within the context of the Caritive project, because instrument is thought of as part of the core Caritive functions in at least some languages with specialized Caritive markers, like Russian or English, where we can say open a bottle without a corkscrew. But in Tagalog, we don't find any examples in the sample. And in fact, if you remember the noun gamit, which means an object being used by someone in any way, there are only 10 tokens of Caritive constructions with the combination hindi gamit, illustrated in example 4, where we have a construction Leon left without his motorcycle, literally with his motorcycle not being used. So this is quite peculiar. We don't see any instrument in the sample, and if we look at the corpus, there are only 10 tokens of specialized Caritive constructions with the for instrument. Next, I'm going to talk about linkers and cases. So first of all, linkers. There are two linkers in Tagalog. One is na or ng, which is a more common one. It's the basic connector in attributive constructions, relative clauses, and many other functions. It has a longer list of functions. And the other one is nang, which has only 3 functions, and the functions partially overlap, but most importantly, in the context of this talk, both linkers are used to connect adverbial clauses. For example, in 5, we have the adverbial clause, he didn't see the principle, and it has to be introduced, it has to be connected to the main clause with a linker. So it can be, here we can see that the 2 linkers are interchangeable in this case. We can use either nang or na, it doesn't matter, no change in semantics whatsoever, but there has to be a linker. We cannot remove the linker here. That's not possible in Tagalog. And if we take a look at this table from with the values based on the data in the sample, we can see that in constructions with voila, we cannot omit the linkers. There has to be some linker, either na in 79 cases or nang in 13 cases, in 13% of cases. But it's not just that these constructions didn't show up in the sample without a linker, but I tried to look for some Caritive constructions with voila without a linker, and it doesn't seem to be possible in Tagalog. On the other hand, it is not just possible for constructions with kasama and dala, but in the case of kasama, it's even the dominant strategy. Caritive constructions with kasama are predominantly used without any linker. This is quite important for Tagalog. Now, secondly, if you look at the lower part of the table with a case, we can see that absentee can be marked either as a nominative or a genitive. Well, in case of voila, we can also use and have to use the linker na or ng in most instances. That's because when used as an independent predicate, voila has to introduce its argument with the linker if the argument is non-referential. So, for example, if you want to say something like there is no money, you would say walang pera with the linker. But if you have to say the money is not there, the money doesn't exist anymore, we ran out of money or something like that, you would use the nominative marker saying wala ang pera. So the data in this table reflects that for wala. But what's important is if you look at the second column for kasama, there is one instance of construction where the absentee is marked with a genitive marker. And these two properties that we can use the constructions with kasama and dala without a linker, and that we can use the genitive marking for the absentee in constructions with kasama, they seem to, well, they give basis to argue that kasama and dala are being grammaticalized as prepositions. If you look at the example in six where we have an adverbial clause, I am naked. So he or she ran when or while I was naked. It has to be introduced with the linker, none in this case. We cannot omit this linker. But if you look at Caritive construction in 7, the linker, we can use the linker na, it can be nang, but it can be omitted. And in fact, in most cases for constructions with kasama, it is omitted. And instead of using the basic marking for the subject of an adverbial clause, which is the nominative ang, we can also substitute it with the genitive marker nang. So if we imagine this construction without a linker and with the genitive marking, it doesn't seem to be different in any way from the syntax of prepositional phrases in Tagalog. And in fact, if this is grammaticalization, it follows the pattern of well-known grammaticalization strategy in Tagalog, which, for example, of such prepositions like the temporal preposition matapos, which means after. Because matapos originally is a verb meaning to finish, like it's still used as a verb in the modern language. Like in example 8, we can say the class finished. Here the verb is used in its perfective form. And then in example 9, we can use the verb with the conjunction nang, which means when. The form is exactly the same as that of the linker nang, but there is some syntactic differences in the distribution. The linker nang cannot be placed at the beginning of the sentence, while the conjunction can. So when the conjunction nang, when, is used with a verb, it has to be the verb has to be used in its neutral aspect form or the infinitive form, in other terms. So the phrase is nang matapos. Then it seems that it's at some point, like in example 10, at some point this nang got reinterpreted as a linker and as an admissible linker, but the form of the verb stayed the same as matapos, and it got reinterpreted as well as a preposition. So in example 10, we have the construction after 5 months of the police searching, which, if the linker is present, can also be interpreted as a verb after 5 months of the police, when 5 months of police searching finished. But then nowadays, it's also possible to use the argument of matapos, not with the nominative argument, not nominative marking, but with genitive marking, like in 11, where we have matapos ng dalawang taon. It closed 2 years later. And this combination, matapos ng, in this construction, the syntax of an adverbial clause has broken down completely. And the combination matapos ng is in fact not different in any way from the syntax of any typical preposition in Tagalog. Another important thing is the linear positions available to the caritive clauses in Tagalog. So there are 4 basic linear positions in Tagalog. The neutral one being the right periphery. Tagalog is a predicate initial language. So in the neutral word order, all the arguments go behind the predicate in the right periphery. Then there is non-emphatic inversion, which is applied mostly to adverbials. For example, reply quickly, and we can use the adverbial quickly after the verb or before the verb connected with the linker, and there is no semantic distinction between the two, no apparent semantic distinction, hence the term non-emphatic inversion. And finally, topicalization, there is also another type of position, which is labeled as fronting, but it didn't show up in the sample, so I'm not going to talk about it. But topicalization, um, there are three tokens of the topicalized constructions for caritive constructions with Kasama, like in 12. So the topicalized position is the leftmost position in the sentence, which, when present in the sentence, contains information topic and is followed by an intonation break or marked with a comma in writing or with a topic boundary marker I. So in this example, the caritive clause, unrelated to the story about Kambal and Kulod, or literally not with the story about Kambal and Kulod. So what's important about these three instances of topicalized Kasama clauses is that this position is not accessible for typical adverbial clauses either. So in 13, if you remember the example, he left with me being naked, you cannot put the clause nakahubad ako, I am naked, into the topicalized position. That's impossible. While this topicalized position is frequently occupied by prepositional phrases. So this might be used as a further evidence of grammaticalization of clauses with Kasama. Next, yeah, I think I still have some time. I'm going to talk about controllers of the caritive clauses, or in other words, well, in the context of this study, it's the anchor of the absentee. So Tagalog is quite famously a language with the Philippine type voice system, which means that it has a symmetrical voice, meaning that there are no apparent basic forms. There are second position enclitics, and it has more than two formally and semantically different undergoer voices. Now, there are different opinions on what can function as controllers of depictives or secondary predicates in Tagalog. Kruger claims that only the nominative argument in the sentence can control depictives. According to Senya, controllers are established with the help of linear order and real-world expectations, whatever that means. And according to Nagaya, there is quite a long list of possible participants that can function as controllers of depictives. Now, what's important here is that according to Nagaya, it's mostly nominative arguments. It can be the agent or undergoers. But as for non-nominative undergoers, they can only be marginally acceptable as the controller. But if we look at this data from the sample, we see that that is not quite the case, because if you look at the data for the construction with Kasama, we can see that non-nominative undergoers are at least as frequently accepted as the controller as nominative undergoers. So an example of non-nominative undergoer being the controller is shown in 15, where we have an undergoer 75,000 pesos spent, and the caritive phrase hindi kasama ang maintenance, not including the maintenance, or maintenance not being companion. Okay, so next, on the next few slides, I have three tables showing clusterings of properties that I found in the sample. So for example, for constructions with wala, I found that there are 9 clusters of properties that I've looked into. As for the most frequent one, having 10 tokens in the sample, other other combinations of properties had only one or two tokens in the sample. So here on this slide, I have two examples for the two most frequent clusters of properties for constructions with voila. So in 16, it's he will offer a flawless RAM. It's an attributive construction. Um, and in the right periphery. And in 17, we have walang kamatayang samahan, which means immortal company, company that doesn't have death. So the only difference between the two is that in the second example, it is used in non-emphatic inversion to the left of the constituent being modified. Next, this slide shows clustering of properties, clusters of properties for constructions with Kasama. I found only 5 clusters like that in the data, in the sample, the most frequent one being having 12 tokens. And here are 2 examples for the 2 most frequent clusters. Example 18, we left without him, and example 19, he will have new life without Dayanara. And as you can see, the only difference between the 2 most frequent clusters is that in the first one, there is a personal pronoun, and in the second one, a personal noun is used. And finally, this table shows clusters of properties for constructions with Dala. And I found only, again, I remind you that there are only 13 instances of Caritive constructions with Dala in the corpus. And in these 13 examples, I found only 2 clusters. And here are the examples for them. Sorry. So the first one is, I ran out of the faculty room right away without my bag. And the second one, don't come back, don't return without a medicine. And it goes on like without a medicine that will be able to treat me. By the way, it's the semantics of carrying of this predicate Dala raises a question, the question of whether whether there is always motion involved in Caritive constructions with this predicate. As it turns out, in nine examples out of 13 in the corpus, there are motion verbs, like in example 20, tumakbo, ran, going outside, or in 21, where the verb is babalik, return, motion verb. But there was one example of construction which didn't have any motion verb, but the motion was implied. So it was something like you go take a shower without a towel. It didn't have any go verb, but it was you take showers without a towel. But it is implied that in order to take shower, you need to go to the bathroom. So I can see you taking showers without a towel. So the motion there is implied. But in 3 cases, there was no motion implied, and the Caritive construction with Dala actually referred to some property or parameter, I think. So one of the examples that I remember was, we're destined to be prosecuted by people who do not carry faith. So there's, strictly speaking, there is no motion implied in that example. Okay, and finally, I want to say a few words about some alternative means of expressing Caritive constructions in Tagalog. So on the one hand, we in a study that I did earlier on constructions with the noun kasama, which included all possible constructions with the noun kasama companion, not just Caritive constructions. I found that a 1,000 sentence sample of such constructions contained only 2 instances of Caritive constructions. On the other hand, Sorry. On the other hand, we've seen that instrument didn't show up in the sample in this study at all. So the natural question is to ask is, isn't it the case that maybe these three constructions are not the most common way to express caritive meanings in Tagalog? So instead of using a caritive construction, is it possible that speakers in natural discourse, speakers would say something like in 22, Maine didn't use any GMA artists to become phenomenal, with voila being used as the main predicate, instead of using construction something like Maine became phenomenal without any GMA artists. On the other hand, it might be possible that instead of saying something like Pedro came last night, Pedro came to the party without Maria, the most common and most natural way to refer to the same situation be Maria was not with Pedro last night at the party. So this question is not addressed in my study, and I think that in order to clarify the situation, to find out which means are most common, the most natural in the natural discourse to refer to situations that can be encoded with caritive constructions, would be to use probably to use elicitation interviews, but not with verbal clues, not with verbal stimuli, but with some visual stimuli like images and videos. Because if we present a speaker with a verbal clue, an English sentence, Peter came without Mary, there is a high risk that the speaker would feel compelled to give us a construction that would mirror the original English sentence in the closest possible way. So some construction with a preposition or an adverbial clause, which does not mean that that construction is the most natural in Tagalog discourse. So here are my conclusions. First of all, Tagalog doesn't have any specialized constructions for expressing caritive meanings, but there are many periphrastic constructions. I chose 3 constructions of those to include in this study. And there is quite a lot of variation in the semantic functions among the 3 constructions, with the construction with voila being most generic. And then many semantic functions are missing in the sample, most notably instrument. And the data on linkers, cases, and linear positions available for the 3 constructions suggests that there might be grammaticalization going on. The controller's data shows wider acceptance of non-nominative undergoers than it's been claimed in the literature before. And there is a bigger question of the position of these 3 constructions within the whole range of possible means of expressing non-involvement in the language. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, any questions? Oh, well, while the others are thinking, I've got a clarification or a comment, or I don't know what. What do you mean by the instrument? Because sometimes in your examples, the thing you meant by the instrument didn't look like a typical instrument. Well, for example, well,
I think I had only one example with an instrument.
Or 2, so maybe. Just a second. You have one example on the last but one page, or and another one.
I think this one, no?
Yeah,
Well, I classify it in our questionnaire, in the questionnaire we use in the project. I would classify this example as this absentee as transport, mode of transportation. So if there are only 10 sentences with Hindi gamut in the corpus, and only one of them is used to denote non-involvement of transportation, but 9 sentences were just typical instruments, like something to open a bottle without a corkscrew or something like that. I don't remember particular examples.
And probably they are so rare because we don't need to express this meaning. Well, why would we say that we want to open a bottle of beer without a corkscrew? I don't know. It's not a typical. It's not a typical situation in our life, no.
Well, I'm not sure, but well, I don't know. But it seems to me that there are more caritive constructions involving instrument in some other languages. I would suppose, like in Russian or in English, there are more constructions that can be found in a corpus. But here, surprisingly, we don't find too many. So one possibility is what you said, that there is no need to express that meaning, but it seems to me that it's more plausible that those meanings are expressed somehow else.
Well, thank you. Natasha Perkova.
Sorry if I somehow missed it or just don't remember. Do you understand correctly that Vala is used mainly in your sample only with this linker, right? With like Valang, right?
Correct. In 99 cases, it's the argument, the absentee with Vala is introduced with the linker na.
Sorry, but can you still comment what the difference between linker and case to the left in the first column means? Yeah. Sorry.
So in constructions with Vala, it's actually not just specific to caritive constructions.
Yes, I know.
Independent
Okay.
There are options. You can use either the linker na or the
two linkers, right?
Sorry?
You can use either of these two linkers, but in the caritive function,
you can use only the linker nang. What you see in this table is actually one linker nang. It has 2 forms depending on
okay
form, but you can use either this linker na or the nominative marker ang, or see if it's personal noun or something like that. They're not interchangeable. The choice depends on whether the argument of Vala is non-referential. So like if it's no money, I don't have any money, not some particular money, you would have to say it with a linker. It has to be Vala. But if you want to say that I don't have the money that you gave me, for example, you would have to say it with the nominative marker. So wala ang pera.
And in your sample, you had 99% of this linker usages,
correct,
right?
So in 99% of the sample, caritive constructions involve something non-referential. And in one example, it was the personal pronoun you. So
okay.
Without you.
Okay, so I think I'm actually asking it because I was looking at the languages from the sample of the project first of all in the Bible corpus. So this is a tricky case first of all because you see if it's a negative existential. But it is used in this very specific form with the linker as a caritive marker, and how to classify it, because if like negative existential forms can be just this independent Vala, then this is sort of formally different. So I think this is an important question maybe for the whole project. And another thing is that in the Bible, I think there are some contexts with pronouns and personal names. So like without Christ, without someone else. So probably it will be for us also just have a look at that. And there are several translations, I think, in Tagalog. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But if it's up to me, I would classify only voila as the caritive marker here, without the link, the following linker, because that part of grammar actually is
it comes from the syntax.
The Tagalog language. It's not specific just to caritive constructions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maxim?
Yes, thank you, Sergei. Well, first of all, I wanted to clarify if I understood this, again, this difference between linkers and cases in this table, right? So, so linker is the device, in this case, used for the whole caritive construction to attach it to the main clause, and case is what is used just with the absentee.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay. So I also had some questions about the status of these constructions. So each of these constructions, at least the construction with voila, it is clausal, right?
Yeah.
There isn't any doubt. So, and are there any signs of the status of this clause? Is it dependent or coordinate, or something mixed?
It is a subordinate clause because of the linker. The linker
So it's always
tells that it's an adverbial clause and not a coordination construction. Definitely.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, and I also had a small question about the anchor parameter in your table somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, so it seems that you had a lot of examples like that with voila.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering what examples were there. And
okay, so this is actually a good question because in many cases, well, I'm sure that some of these instances you or somebody else wouldn't qualify as anchor parameters, but that's the tricky part here, because in many examples it's quite difficult to classify things like that. So actually, I'll show you the extended version of my presentation. I have some examples in there. I had to cut it shorter because I didn't have enough time. So I do have some problematic cases here. I think mostly it concerned things like some, I don't know how to classify it, abstract property. So examples like 22 or 23. So if you make a plan without you, make plans for life without you, it can be argued in various ways. It can be argued that you are not part of the plan, you are not in the plan, so it could be locality, or you're not parameter because the plan in some way doesn't have you, or something like that. Same thing goes for constructions like in 23, like endless hardships. So it could be argued that the end of a hardship is part of whole, but it could be that argued that hardship is a situation actually, and the end of a hardship is another situation, so it's a concomitant situation. So there are actually lots of tricky questions. So I had to make some choice in such cases and to stick to it in hoping that I would be consistent at the very least, if not great, in classifying for that way.
Okay, thank you.
Another example is everything involving God is hard to classify, like analysis of the world without God. So if we think hard enough about such examples, we end up in a theological dispute with yourself. Like, is God part of the world? Is it the other way around? Is it a semantic function of locality or something else? So I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I totally sympathize with your like. Yeah, I see. This material gave a lot of problems. Yeah.
it's easier to find some example for a particular semantic function in, say, corpus. But when you take a sample of different examples, random sample from the corpus, you would have some weird cases sometimes, which are not very clear how they should be classified.
Yeah.